This video is looking at an essay on criticism by Alexander Pope, or more accurately, the extract from part 2 of an essay on criticism, which starts, "A little learning is a dangerous thing." Now, whether you're studying this as an unseen extract or whether or not you're studying it for an exam, what we're going to do is go through and identify some of the meanings, main themes, techniques and effects that are created by those. So it would help if you had a copy of the poem in front of you. It is that extract that starts, "A little learning is a dangerous thing," and ends with "Alps on Alps arise." And as we're going to assume that you've read the extract already, it's available online if you want to download a copy to annotate along. Okay, so looking at a brief bit of context, first of all, the whole poem was written in 1709, published 2 years later, and Pope was writing during a period called the Enlightenment. Now, if you are not familiar with that and you need the context for your exam preparations, then just go and do a little bit of Googling. Generally, if you are enlightened, it means you know more stuff, and that generally kind of encapsulates the idea of what was going on in the Enlightenment. It was a period of great learning, both in terms of the arts and kind of what we now recognise as the sciences. Pope was in his early 20s when this was written and published, and it was published to great acclaim. And it provides a study of literary critical principles. He's heavily influenced by kind of classical ideas as being the ideal. Towards part 3, he's looking at how the greats did it, how the ancients did it. So you need to kind of bear in mind that he's drawing heavily on the likes of Horace and Homer and stuff, just to say, this is how it should be done. It's written in heroic couplets, which are rhyming couplets of iambic pentameter, to give it that kind of slightly more grand feel. And it's generally a discussion of what good critics should do, approach satirically. And if you're not familiar with the concept of satire, it's that idea of kind of pointed humour. Usually you are holding something up to criticism or looking at the flaws or faults in something by creating comedy about it. So today, we still get quite a lot of political satire. Those cartoons that appear in newspapers, TV programmes, a lot of comedians will satirise what's going on. And it's the idea of the spiky sort of humour. Looking through the essay, because obviously it's considerably longer than this extract, you can see it's in 3 parts. Part 1 deals with literary critics' lack of taste and the problems that this can cause. Basically, Pope is trying to argue that it's far, far worse to kind of ignorantly criticise a poem and the consequences that flow from that than it is to actually write bad poetry in the first place. Part 2 looks at the mistakes that critics make and takes issue with poems that have often been praised because they are by no means perfect. And this extract is taken from the beginning of part 2. And then part 3 moves on to what Pope thinks about what should happen, what criticism should be like in its best form, using the ancients, using those classical influences as an example, as a model. Okay, so don't get freaked out by all of my annotation to start off with. We were going to work our way through it, and I'm going to annotate in red. So there we go, little scribble at the top, so you can see where we're up to. So first of all, just looking through the poem, making sure you understand what it's actually talking about, because it's written in this slightly archaic style. Okay, archaic means old-fashioned. And obviously it's written as a kind of piece in heroic couplets, so it's got that full rhyme at the end of the lines in terms of rhyming couplets, and it's written in iambic pentameter, so you've got that regular rhythm to it. But looking at what it's saying, first of all, so "A little learning is a dangerous thing. Drink deep or taste not the Pierian spring." So it's bad to know a little bit. Okay, don't start thinking that you can take that little bit of knowledge and apply it without causing damage. And all I'm going to do is go through and explain meaning-wise and with some paraphrasing so we all know what we're talking about. So he then says, drink deeply or don't taste from this spring. And you can see from my note, spoilers, what the spring is. But, you either learn a lot or you shouldn't learn anything. At the Pierian Spring, shallow draughts, so shallow drinks, shallow measures, will intoxicate the brain. So they'll send you off on the wrong foot. And drinking largely sobers us again. So you've got that ambiguity there. But generally, the more you drink, the more you come back to your senses. You will have been thrown off kilter and kind of intoxicated by a little bit. You'll be all giddy. But the more you learn, the more kind of competent you'll become. And at first, you'll be fired up with what you get from the muse. So what you get from your inspiration. And when we're young, we really try and push the heights of art, so the boundaries of what we can do. And we have this level of our mind, and we can take short sights from there. But we can't, by implication, we can't see right ahead of us. And we don't really look at what we've done behind us. And that can be either what we've done personally or what we've done collectively as a society. But we go further and further on, and we look with all these strange surprises as we see this endless kind of prospect in front of us, these distant scenes. It's this idea that the more you know, the more you realise that there is to know. And then he starts this idea of knowledge being a journey or a quest or so. So he says, we're so pleased with this that we first of all try to climb these huge mountains, and we go over the valleys. We seem to reach the sky. We've got past the eternal snow. The clouds and the mountains, they seem like things we've seen for the last. But once we've got past those, once we've surmounted them, we start to shake when we look at all the work that is in front of us, because the journey is forever getting made longer and longer. And as this prospect, this view, this potential tires our wandering eyes, so as we're looking at it, we realise how much of a journey there is. And even as we're doing this, you can see the hills over the hills over the hills, and the mountains rising on the mountains and the mountains. So starting off with that idea of, look, you get this little bit of knowledge. You start, especially when you're young, thinking that, you're so intelligent, you're so kind of erudite. I'll put at the top, it means so learned. Okay, there we go, erudite. But instead, the more you learn, the more you realise there is to learn. And therefore, the more kind of humbled you are almost by the kind of scope of everything and your own limitations. And hopefully that makes sense. So going from the top then, little learning is a dangerous thing. I've said here that we've got this note. It's a really famous line, frequently quoted. It's quoted now to mean all sorts of learning, that basically kind of, if you only know a bit, don't mess. But in this context, it's talking about literary criticism. It's saying, if you only know a little bit about writing and poetry and literature, then who are you to really kind of start to throw your weight around? Because it's not just a kind of embarrassing thing or so, it's a dangerous thing. And this essay on criticism examines, the harm that you can do with misapplied or misguided knowledge. And you get the assertion, Pope's speaker here, or Pope himself arguably, is telling you that is the case. This is a kind of confident warning from that assertion. We then move on to the instruction with that plosive alliteration, the assertion, the imperative, firm instruction, monosyllables, drink deep. You've actually, with this learning, you have got to take as much of it as you can in. Or kind of the alternative is to not do it at all. So don't go anywhere near that metaphorical fountain of knowledge, really. And you can see that the Pierian Spring from Greek mythology used to give, or was said to give, this huge knowledge of art and science to anyone who tasted its waters. So what you need to do is you need to drink, a huge amount of this to be able to kind of know what you're talking about. Because if you're at the Pierian Spring, so that's the there, Okay, shallow drafts intoxicate the brain. So we're starting with this metaphor of drinking knowledge, and you can pick up on all the connotations of water and its life-giving and restorative and kind of natural properties. But if you only have a small amount, be it shallow water or a shallow drink, that draft, and remember you talk about a draft of ale as well, so you've got these competing images here of alcohol and water. So draft and intoxicate and sober are going from the semantic field of kind of alcohol. And then we've got shallow, drinking, drink deep, spring, all to do with water. But this kind of paradoxical idea, and if you have a paradox, it means that, it doesn't seem to be, it seems impossible on first reading or first encountering, and then the more you think about it, the more you think, okay, that actually does make sense. You can reconcile the two parts. So Pope is arguing that actually, if you only have this little bit, you get all giddy. And don't forget that the word toxic is in the middle of intoxicate, that, there is this connotation that this is not a good thing. It is poisoning you within your kind of giddiness, just like alcohol, I guess. And the more you drink, you become sober, you become more reasoned, you become more rational, you become more erudite again. But if you look at that, I mentioned the ambiguity when I went through it the first time. You can say, and drinking largely sobers us again, or in drinking largely sobers us again. So I guess the ambiguity is can you ever be fully sober once you've started to drink? Or is knowledge always going to leave you a little bit giddy? Or is it the largeness of the drink that sobers you? And if you're commenting on Pope's ideas, then go for both interpretations, because an awful lot of mark schemes, those higher levels, that exploratory, detailed and perceptive, is always talking about alternative interpretations and being able to balance those ideas. So you're after the idea of ambiguity there, because we don't have any caesura, we don't have any pause in the middle of the line, so no caesura, which allows us to pause where we want, if we want. Okay, so we then kind of move through, and we've got all these end-stopped lines giving that kind of certainty and, again, authority to the speaker. He starts now with some fricative alliteration, maybe to show the excitement of fired at first sight. So the kind of fricatives move into that sibilant kind of sound. And you're all fired up. Could be the gasping, could be mimetic. So mimicking the gasping there with what the muse imparts. So a muse, you're probably aware, is something that inspires your creativity. So you've been to this spring, you've been given this knowledge, you're all fired up with it. But then in fearless youth, and again, we've got that other fricative, and again, a bit more sibilance, we tempt the heights of arts. So notice that we, that collective pronoun, Pope is talking about the collective dangers that humanity experiences, okay, and is including both the speaker and the reader within that group. We've all got to be careful. This is a universal, so this is an experience that applies to everybody, a universal experience. And we tempt the heights. So there's that idea of pushing boundaries, almost kind of, the danger of heights. If you're tempting the heights, the implication is, are you going to fall? What's going to happen? Because from the bounded level of our mind, short views we take. And this is interesting because bounded is fixed. Okay, think of bound boundaries. Think of bound jumping as well. So you've got that kind of tension there. But from our minds, we can take short views. Okay, and that level, whilst we're attempting those heights, that level is fixed. We are not perfect. We are not able to see these huge distances or make these huge advances. And the caesura here balances this idea of, we've got this short view, we can't see behind us. So what's in front of us is limited, what's behind us is out of view and out of mind. And so that caesura kind of balances the antithesis, the contrast within that line. And it's a warning. It's saying, actually, you are limited in your understanding. It's interesting that we get our first case of enjambment here, because it leaves mind kind of loose on that line before you're kind of whipped round to kind of go into the short views. So at the moment, the mind seems almost kind of limitless left at the end of that line, but then you get the limitation, short views. And again, those monosyllables maybe kicking in. Short views we take, nor see their lengths. This is not that kind of huge polysyllabic Latinate vocabulary when we're talking about mankind's understanding. It's quite simple. We don't see what's behind us, but more advanced. So as we go on, we behold with strange surprise new distant scenes of endless science rise. And just picking up all of that sibilance there in terms of the wonder and the awe, maybe. And again, we've got a little bit of enjambment flicking us round, almost kind of propelling us forward to these new distant scenes, almost like they are rising up in front of us. We can't stop them. We are left with our surprise here at the end of this line, and the new distant scenes of endless science rise, ending with that exclamation as the end stop. And again, we've got this kind of caesura here, almost presenting that idea, more advanced, behold, that idea that we are going to look at. And you might want to also play with the idea that we're slightly passive. We are looking. We are not discovering them. They are being presented to us, these ideas. Then I think, again, we get another little bit of ambiguity. It's that line, so pleased at first, the towering Alps we try, or so pleased at first, the towering Alps we try. One would imply that we are initially pleased and then we're going to be limited. One would imply that we are a little bit smug, and I think both of them work, and both of them would repay being explored in an answer. And bear in mind that we try the towering Alps. We don't kind of conquer them, we don't mount them, we don't kind of, surmount the summit. We kind of have to try it. And these Alps are towering. So we've got straight away here, just looking at these notes, this metaphor that the artist's quest kind of starts here, and the idea that the artist's quest or the writer's quest or the critic's quest is through this natural landscape against which the artist is insignificant. Okay, so in this metaphor, the landscape, the nature, or the impact of nature is one which has all the power and has all the force and has all the glory, and the people, the critics, are kind of tiny and insignificant in comparison. So we've got these dual themes that Pope's using of, nature as a model, as something that is sublime and powerful and is dwarfing mankind, but also kind of writing is perpetual learning. You don't stop on this quest once you've started. You only realise how much there is to explore. So, after we've looked at the Alps, we go over the vales, we seem to tread the sky. Notice that it's only we seem to tread the sky. So there's that potential alignment with the divine, but it is only in the eye of the beholder, as it were, that this is apparent rather than actual. Okay, we think it's the case, but it's not. It's appearance versus reality, I guess. Eternal snows appear already past. Again, paradoxically, we've got that idea, how can you have eternal snow if it's already past? So it could be that, these critics are getting a little ahead of themselves if they think they are on top of nature, if they think they are kind of conquering things. The first clouds, same kind of idea, the first clouds and mountains seem the last. And you get all of those concepts we've just talked about coming together in that line, that idea of appearance versus reality and the kind of paradox of it. This is all to do with the critic's perception, and that perception is dangerous because it's inaccurate, it's limited. But those attained, we tremble to survey. So once we've done those, we tremble to survey the growing labours of the lengthened way. So again, you get that enjambment, almost kind of heightening the challenge. The labours are growing as we're flicked over to the next line. And physically, we are now in physical awe as well as psychological awe of the task in front of us. We can only shake, whereas one moment earlier, we seem to be kind of treading the sky. We are being very much put in our place by the scope of the landscape. And we see that the growing labours of the lengthened way is what's making us tremble, that there is more and more increasing work to do. And if you look at these present participles, growing, increasing in terms of nature, and we are wandering as our eyes tire. So really, kind of when you are comparing mankind and nature directly, then you realise that nature, and in this case, nature is criticism, nature is the world of literature, definitely has the upper hand here. Because as we are looking and our eyes are wandering with all those connotations of lack of focus or I suppose, looking round and not being able to fix on one thing and moving kind of without purpose or direction. Hills peep o'er hills. So, this landscape is growing, and it's almost kind of whimsical, that idea of, it's just peeping out at us. This is going bigger and bigger and bigger and just looking at us as our eyes are wandering and tired. Nature is peeping with all of that kind of cheekiness that it connotes. And Alps on Alps arise. So these Alps that we tried put back an appearance and, have that grandeur and power of arising up in front of us. And this extract ends with that exclamation. So if we look, these heroic couplets are really showing this as a kind of magnificent quest of some sort, and one that humanity isn't going to win. Satirically, it's looking at the limitations that people have, and I suppose as well a comment that we shouldn't give up, we should keep on going. And it is those people who drink the shallow draught that are the ones who are in for the most kind of censure, because they are the ones who are kind of giving up. You've got to embrace the challenge and carry on making your way through the landscape, which is this kind of metaphorical landscape of literature and criticism. Okay, I hope that has helped. Please feel free to put any questions in the comments or so, but good luck with your essays and your future studies.